So I want to make a video on my crude approach to variable valve timing and what I did on this 440. So this is gangrene. It's my 73 Charger. Despite what it looks like, this is a very stock 440, stock valves and stock 452 casting iron heads, stock crank, 440 source stock replacement rods. Doesn't have any real exotic parts. It's got some old TRW pistons that I got off of eBay for a few $100. I think they're the 2266F, so they're real low compression. So there's nothing exotic about this. These are even rocker arms that I got off of eBay. Their performance quotient, PQX, they're okay. They're not anywhere near the greatest, but they're okay. So anyhow, so my approach to variable valve timing, way back when, if you talk to your grandfather, that's how old they are, he'll tell you about Rhodes lifters. So a Rhodes lifter is much like any other lifter, and there's a few different versions of them when you look on the Rhodes website. These are the original Rhodes lifter, and what they are is basically they're a high bleed down lifter. The oil that pumps up or cushions your hydraulic flat tappet lifter, what Rhodes did is they made the lifter bleed down and collapse, almost like what you would call a bad lifter. They metered the bleed down rate of these lifters, and so basically they run collapsed, and then when you get up around 3,000, 3,500 RPM, the oil cannot bleed down fast enough for the lifter to stay collapsed. So the lifter pumps up to a somewhat normal height, and you've regained what would be the same performance as just having a normal standard lifter in there. So the way they sell these things, they're supposed to reduce lift and duration, which when you have the collapsed lifter, that's what it does. So what they're supposed to, what they were, sold as an anti-pump up, which most of you guys really don't have to worry about. It's an old thing. Ask your grandpa about lifters, staying pumped up, whatever, bending push rods or creating issues. But anyhow, so how they were sold was you could take a larger cam, somebody that ran too big of a cam in a street car, and some of the characteristics that you're going to get with too big of a cam is you get a lopey idle, you get poor vacuum. The poor vacuum leads to poor carburetor signal, and it leads to an engine that doesn't run very well in the lower RPM range that you would normally be off idle, 1,000 RPM, 1,500, 1,800 RPM. You get an engine that doesn't work very well in the lower RPM ranges on the street. But with your big cam, you work well in the higher RPM ranges that you run at the track. So these lifters were sold as sort of a best of both worlds. What they would do is they would take a bigger hot rod performance camshaft. They would reduce lift and duration by the lifter collapsing, by the lifter bleeding down, and it would make that camshaft act like a smaller, more tame street RV type of lower performance camshaft. And they claimed that you would increase vacuum 1 to 5 inches. They claimed that it reduced duration by 10 or 15 degrees of duration. Sort of going along with that, it's almost like you're widening up your lobe separation angle. So that's how these things were sold. And obviously they work to some degree. They've been around for probably better than 50 years at this point. So what I did on this combination, let me take it a step farther here. What I did on this, when I bought this camshaft, it's been a couple of years, and the new thing in turbo cams, this is a custom cam that I spec'd out myself and I had cut for this engine. It's not a performance cam by any means. Off the top of my head, it might be 228 degrees of duration at 50 thousandths. So it's nowhere near what you guys should consider a performance cam, but in the turbo world, that's a decent sized camshaft. So at the time that I bought this camshaft, it was kind of the new big thing to have a reverse pattern cam, what they call a reverse pattern cam, and it was geared towards turbo motors. And the thinking behind that was, on a reverse pattern cam, you use less lift and duration on the exhaust. Lift wasn't really a big thing, but it was the duration. Less lift and duration on the exhaust. You wanted a quick short burst on the exhaust to help spool up your turbo, but you didn't need the long extended duration on your exhaust, because you're not looking for the scavenging effect of a header in a normal exhaust system. In a turbo setup, you've got back pressure from your turbos. Might not be a lot, might be 1 psi, might be, under full boost. Hell, you might see 20 psi back pressure. So with the back pressure in the exhaust from the turbo, you weren't having the scavenging effect of a long tube header and a normal exhaust system, X pipes and all that. You were losing that, and that's what a normal hot rod camshaft was designed for. So guys started producing, and they're still out there, it's not a completely dead subject, these reverse pattern cams geared towards turbo applications. Not boost in general, not superchargers, turbo applications. So that was kind of the hot thing, and it was something that made me curious, and I wanted to try it. So I custom spec'd a reverse pattern cam for this engine. Before this thing really came to where it is today, I noticed that subject kind of died off enough, and I'll tell you, I started to second guess myself on whether or not I was going to really see benefits from a reverse pattern cam, or I was better off going with a standard hot rod cam, because as what's his name says, every cam is a turbo cam. And you guys know where I'm going with that. So in that second guessing myself, coming full circle around to these Rhodes lifters, I had come up with this idea. And my idea was, instead of running a full set of the Rhodes lifters, what I was going to do was I was going to run the Rhodes lifters on my intake only and not on my exhaust. Now remember, this is a reverse pattern split duration camshaft. So what I'm trying to do there is I'm trying to reduce the lift and duration on my intake valve, and I'm trying to bring the camshaft itself back to a single pattern cam, back to what would be considered a normal camshaft. And my hope there is that in the lower RPM ranges, this acts as a single pattern cam, and I restore some of that bottom end torque that you will see on YouTube dyno tests, and YouTube dyno tests, that are pointed towards reverse pattern cams and whether or not they work. So I'm trying to reverse the effects of the camshaft in lower RPMs, and then get the intake valves to restore full lift and duration and the full profile that I designed into this camshaft in the upper 3,000, 3,500 RPMs up to redline. So effectively, that's where I'm going, is I'm trying to make a standard pattern camshaft in the lower RPMs, and then have it restore itself to a reverse pattern camshaft in the upper RPMs. I don't know how it's going to work, but that's my take on it. And so I've sort of created a very barbaric version of the modern day variable valve timing. And I've done it again by putting a high bleed down lifter on my intakes and a standard lifter on my exhausts. We'll see how it works out. Thanks for listening to my rant.